Here we go. Welcome to Connect and Create. This is episode 14. Thank you all for being here. I'm Corrina Sephora, and it's a pleasure to get to share this midday with you. If my face looks a little rosy, it's because I was just forging some hot steel in my studio for a project and had to finish those last 3 pieces. So once again, those of you that are just joining us, welcome to Connect and Create. It's my pleasure to be here with you today. And I'm going to share a story. I opened up these episode 1. I was the person who shared my story, and then I've had guest speakers every time since then. So because I have some new things that I'm getting ready to offer to the world, I thought this would be a great time to tell my story of what I've been through in terms of what we these days call pivoting. So you're joining me. I'm here in my studio in Atlanta, Georgia. And those of you that don't know, I'm a metal sculptor and mixed media artist. I brought a couple of pieces over to be here in the view, so you get a little flavor, a little taste. And let's see, my name is Corrina Sephora, and I grew up in New Hampshire and Maine and Boston, Massachusetts, where I did my undergraduate at Massachusetts College of Art. My family was from Brooklyn, New York, although they chose to raise us on the farm, learning how to grow all of our own food and all of that, and learn with our hands, learn to work with our hands. I say our because I've got my awesome sister here with us today, so I'm going to speak plural. So I always knew from a very early age that I wanted to be an artist, and it was a matter of which courses should I take, and what projects would I play at the house, on our farm, what games could I enroll our family members, my cousins, my sister, my brothers, my cousins into, that we could play with, always creating something. And while all that play was happening as a young person, I knew that I wanted to make a career out of being an artist. I didn't always know what that would look like, but I knew at an early age that that's what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to make artwork. Now, we grew up in the countryside in New Hampshire, but we had a lot of family in New York City. So many a summer day or any other time during the year, I would go and visit my grandparents. And one of the things that we would do is we'd go to art museums. And as a young person, what I always wanted to do was I wanted to have artwork in museums as well. I wanted to be able to be one of those people that people look to, even when I wasn't there anymore. I was so interested in artist stories. I was interested in who do they get to be for humanity, for society, for the world. One of my favorite places actually was the Museum of Natural History. I've always had a love for the natural world. Recently, I've been very interested in the cosmos in terms of the natural world, but for over a decade, I've worked with nautical forms, with boat forms and water elements. And sometimes it's hard to stick with one direction. So I'm going to tell a little about my story, and then I'm going to talk to you today about what we call these days pivoting, right? You hear that word all the time. And so I was so excited about what's been happening in my life in terms of pivoting during this pandemic. I finally feel like I've taken the actions that I've been thinking about and mulling over and taking webinars on and learning. In fact, creating this Connect and Create was a format that I created so that I could start to become more comfortable with being with people and sharing myself on the World Wide Web. Now I feel pretty comfortable in that. I also wanted to be able to create a platform for other artists and other entrepreneurs to be able to share what they're up to, whether it's pandemic related or their day-to-day mission in the world. And I have a strong belief that artists and entrepreneurs in some ways are one and the same. As an artist, you're constantly taking actions as entrepreneurs would, making the next action towards meeting new collectors or sharing your work or getting out there in the world. And most importantly, getting present to what is your vision for your life? What is your purpose in being an artist, in taking that time, in taking that energy, in taking all of that creative space to be an artist? It's not always an easy road. And I'll tell you, my first day of art school, it was a cool fall afternoon, and I found myself in an auditorium. I was about 18 years old, and I was surrounded by people about my age, a few older, a few younger, and we had a speaker that came to the stage. And when that speaker got to the stage, he said, 1% of all art school students are going to go on to make a living practicing what they study once they get out of art school. Oh, here's the train. And I said to myself in that moment, 1%, like I noticed I was getting agitated. I was getting a little annoyed. And while I wasn't a trust fund child, I did have a relative that generously helped with the first 2 years of my college education. And deeded me with like, okay, now you're going to have to figure it out on your own, Corrina. And I found myself day after day in the basement of the Boston Public Library, looking for grants, looking for scholarships, looking for ways that I could actually, I don't know if you guys can hear the train, but it is coming by. So I found myself on microfiche. This is the days before we have the World Wide Web and the internet so active, and in the early 90s. And, or it wasn't active in my world. And I was able to find some scholarships and grants, and I stayed in school 5 years. I double majored in metalsmithing and sculpture. Now, I'll tell you, when I got out of school, I was determined to set up my own studio. I learned all these skills, I learned all these techniques, and I had this determination. And with my graduation money, I got $500 from my father, I got $500 from my grandmother, and $500 from my mother, and I bought a $1,500 pickup truck. And I had a grinder, a drill, and a whole lot of dreams. I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and I had set up some internships, and I was ready to work with other artists that worked with metal. I wanted to learn everything I possibly could about what would it take to have a career working in metal, being a sculptor, being an artist. Now, I worked with artists that had also completed art school here in Atlanta at the Atlanta College of Art, and I worked in industry. I created my own journeyman apprenticeship program. And there was one old blacksmith. I wanted to work with him, and he said, well, I can see you've got skills, and but I don't have enough work for you. Come back next week. Well, I tell you what, I heard there was a come back next week. When I've got work, I'll hire you. And I had this other job working for these fabricators. I didn't really like what they made, mostly because I knew more than the guy that was running the business about working with metal. I wanted to learn. And so I went back every week, and finally, you know, that guy hired me. And what he said to me when he did, he said, Corrina, I didn't think you'd ever go away. So I got some work for you to do. Now that was some determination, right? Sort of like the determination when that first day of art school, they said 1% of all art school students will go on to make a living practicing what they study. For 15 years of my life, I survived as an artist. I was like, I'm going to make a living. I'm going to do it with these two hands. And I did most of it all by myself. My first forge, my first blacksmith shop, they called it Jungle Forge. You know why they called it Jungle Forge? I lived out near Lake Lanier, about 30, 40 minutes outside of the city. My old pickup truck, and I had a tarp, and I had my vise ratchet strapped to a tree. I had my anvil on a stump, and I dug a hole in the ground to keep it anchored. I made the stump a little extra long. And then I had a basement. I moved all the jelly jars off the shelves. I had a stand-up cooler, and I put a piece of plywood and a piece of metal on top of that. That was my fabrication table. And I built all kinds of pieces. In fact, there's a few large-scale architectural, sculptural pieces that are still standing here in the city of Atlanta that I built in Jungle Forge. And partway through that, I worked for 6 different companies over 2 years. And one of those companies was industry. I wanted to see what's it like to work in heavy industry. I had learned skills. I learned how to weld. I was confident. And I went in and I got a job. I had to take a series of welding tests. And in this job, they were going to x-ray everything that I did. I always knew I wanted to be a sculptor, but I knew I wanted to build large pieces. To date, I've built 3 large sculptures you had to move with cranes. And so I worked as a welder in this company. And I was the first and only woman that was ever hired in the history of the company as a welder. There were women that worked there. They put things in boxes. They signed off papers and various things like that. But my dad raised me with an idea. I'll say our dad since my sister's here. Our dad raised us with this idea. Girls, you can do whatever you want as long as you set your mind to it, no matter what society says. You get an idea in your head, something you want to do, someone you want to be, you don't have to let the constraints of society hold you back. And I always had that going for me. So I worked as a welder for about 6 months, and I'm glad I had that experience. I never wanted to do that for a full career, but these were, as I called, my journeyman apprenticeship years. So after working as a welder, I worked with another two people, and I started to get collectors. People would come in and they were like, oh, this project's too small for us. Maybe Corrina will make it. I was hungry. I wanted to make anything there was. And so I had this collector, Gladney Cooper, and I had Jungle Forge. And I worked for 2 other companies during the day, and one of them would let me use his shop in the evening. And so I was building one piece for her, and then she said, can you build this other piece? And it was kind of big, but I said, sure. And then I'd figure it out along the way. Well, halfway through the project, I was fitting it up at her house. It was a piece that matched this beautiful stained glass door. And I said, listen, Gladney, I'm sorry this is taking me a little longer than I think it should. However, I work for these other guys. You know, I don't have as much time as I'd like to, and my own shop's not all the way set up. She said, well, what would it take? She said, you're so talented, Corrina. You should have your own studio. You should be creating your own ideas. What would it take? Well, I was a little nerdy. I was also determined, and I whipped out the list of each tool that I knew I needed with a little price tag. These were used tools, by the way. And she looked at me and she looked at the list. She went in and she wrote a check for the midpoint on the project. She gave me another check. She became my first benefactor. I left that day encouraged, and I had a little extra cash, and it was a no interest loan. So I went out and I bought that list of tools, and I set up Jungle Forge, and I quit working for everybody else. And I worked on my own pieces. Now I tell you what, a couple years later, I'd made the extra money. I'd built pieces at this point that we had to move with cranes. I had established a business. I had an office administrator and 2 people that worked with me in the studio. And we had some large commissions, some permanently still at the Atlanta Botanical Gardens. And I said, I'm gonna pay Gladney Cooper back. And I invited her over, and I sat her down, and I said, thank you. And I wrote her a check, and I said, thank you. I really appreciate that you believed in me, and that you had an idea that I was going to do something with my life, and that I wanted to be an artist, and you supported me, and I appreciate that. And she came to every art opening I ever had. She'd send flowers if she couldn't come. And I had read of people like Michelangelo that had benefactors, and I felt so honored I had a benefactor. So I lived like that, but I was always planning to survive as an artist. I would pay all the bills, pay off my credit cards every month, buy another piece of equipment. Once in a while, I'd take a vacation, but not that often. Maybe it was camping. And then about 8 years ago, I took a course called the Landmark Forum, and I realized I didn't have to survive. I could thrive as an artist. What would it be like to fulfill those childhood dreams of being nationally and internationally renowned, traveling around the world and exhibiting work, all of that? And so I surrounded myself with a group of people that created this thing they called possibility. And out of that environment around me, I was able to take on projects in a whole different way, out of thriving as an artist. I let go of surviving as an artist. Now, as time goes on, I built up my studio. I created classes and workshops that people could come and take with me. You know, on and off, I worked as an adjunct professor, mostly because I love teaching. I love sharing with people knowledge. I love seeing that moment of inspiration. And if you go back to both what my father said, you can do whatever you want as long as you set your mind to it. I love encouraging those people that have a dream. They have something to fulfill here on this earth in their creative life. And so over the last couple of years, over the last 25 years, I have taught hundreds of people how to weld. I've taught hundreds of people how to create blacksmithing projects. And I have created storytelling workshops where I work with someone doing speaking circles and people create new stories in their lives. Somewhere along the lines, I started to create a new story in my life. So I've worked with people doing collaging, doing painting, all kinds of things so that they get to fulfill on who they are as an artist. I've worked with individuals on one-on-one, and I've supported people through my VIP days. Now, all of this has been in person. I think I had one or two people that I worked with where we worked over the phone for part of what they were up to. But pretty much everyone that ever learned from me either got on an airplane and flew to Atlanta, stayed in a hotel and came to a weekend workshop, or got in their car, drove through traffic, and came to my studio. So back to the point of this whole talk today. A couple months ago, everything started getting canceled and postponed. And I'll tell you what, I had a full calendar booked of weekend workshops, of in-person courses. And one by one, I had to send emails and phone calls to all of these students and say, your workshop has been postponed. Well, we're on to our third time of postponing some of these workshops because I was hopeful that inside of this pandemic, things were gonna shift. People would stay at home, the virus would get under control, we'd flatten the curve, all that stuff we've been talking about. I have to say, it hasn't quite gone that way. And right in the beginning, I found myself getting on these webinars. I found myself getting on these, I was going back to school myself. I had extra time. I'd shut down my studio. I canceled my classes. All of my big commissions got put on hold. 2 giant sales got put on hold, and I froze. But what did I do? I stayed active, and I remembered 1% of all art school students are ever going to make a living. And I started getting in dialogue with people, sharing with other artists, sharing with creative people. And I really got present to, I have a message that I can share with other people beyond only teaching people how to weld, beyond teaching people how to make a sculpture with their own 2 hands, with all of my tools and equipment. Although I love that dearly and I look forward to the days that that happens again, I realized I could do this thing that people were talking about. They call it pivot. Now, it wasn't a very comfortable choice. And in fact, I did something that I would call procrastinate. I learned some more. I think I took 4 different webinars where I learned about how people, what formats people use to teach online. And I had a videographer. If you look at my website, I have a series of different fabulous videos. They're all done by the same videographer. I called him up and I got a quote and I was like, let me get back to you. Let me get my idea really solid. So I thought about it some more. And last week, Felipe Barral, he came and we shot the videos. You know why? I put pen to paper with my amazing office assistant, Pearl. And really, it was more like I spoke and she typed everything out. I had it all worked out in my head. I'd put notes together of the different courses that I was going to offer. And I finally took the action. I hired the videographer. On the website, we have all of the new courses. And I'm going to tell you a little about the course that I'm most excited about. I'll just give you a little kind of overview. So the course that I'm most excited about, it's called Big Vision. Why is it called Big Vision? Because that's what I realized. That's the first step to get present to. What's your big vision? What is it that you want to say and you want to put out there in the world? What's important to you about being an artist, being a creative person, being an entrepreneur? And out of getting to that, I realized I could design a whole course. And I spoke with another artist and she started talking to me about success. And she said, well, success to me is when I sell my work. I haven't sold any paintings. I'm not successful. And I said, listen, I have a lot of definitions of success. For me, one of the highest forms of success is to be invited to exhibit, to be invited to show my work, to be invited to give a lecture, to be invited to give a demo. In metalworking, a lot of it is learned by working with your hands. And I said, one of my the moment that I knew I had succeeded was a couple years ago. I had someone who'd been a student of mine, maybe 15 years ago, for a weekend workshop. He called me up and he said, Corrina, I'm writing a grant and I want to have you come be a visiting artist. We're going to have an exhibition of your work and I'd like you to teach my students. I'd like you to share your story of who you are as an artist and what you've been through over the last years. And I said, yes. I'm going to tell you, they paid me like $8,000 to come and share who I am as an artist, to exhibit my work and to pass that work on, that enthusiasm. And at the time, I happened to have been kind of in a low point in my life. As an artist, it's never just like this. It's like, woo, woo. The one thing you can count on as an artist is there's not a whole lot you can count on. You always create it day by day. You can patch that on to being an entrepreneur as well. So once I got to the campus, he took me out to lunch. We sat there at lunch and he said, listen, Corrina, the reason that you're here is I wanted to thank you. You said something to me when I took that workshop from me. You said, you're talented. You should stick with this. And I took that to heart. It motivated me. He said I'd always been at the back of my class. I forget if he was ADD or dyslexic or something in that range, right? Not at the top of the class scholastically. And he said, I wanted to thank you. I wanted you to share some of the enthusiasm you have with my students, with my university. He's now he's the head sculpture professor at this university. And so he wanted to thank me. And I realized that's the highest form for me of success, being invited, right? So where am I going with this? So I realized when I had this conversation with this artist, there are so many different forms of success. For me, there's this expression, when a tree falls in the forest and nobody ever heard it fall, did it really fall? You've heard that before. Well, I kind of feel that way about exhibitions. When you have an art exhibition and nobody's ever written about it and people don't know about it, did it really happen? Did it matter? You know, all that art history that I had read, Clement and Greenberg, you know, all these people that spoke about Jackson Pollock, you know, the art critics had a lot to do with how successful an artist was or wasn't. And so early on in life, I thought, you know, it really makes sense to have someone write about your work. And I make a point of sharing with people that I've got an exhibition and something's happening, or my students are having an exhibition, or on and on like that. And so you'll see on my website, there's a whole section about press. So there's a lot that I realized that I've learned. I've learned through things that don't work. You know, one of the things is writing contracts as an artist, especially when you're making a commission. You can say that about being an entrepreneur, having an agreement that everyone's abiding by. Out of 25 years, there's only one time, and one time only, I didn't get paid on a commission. And why? Because I didn't abide by my contract. We had extra movers from the designer, and it was busy when we got to the site. My contract says that I get paid in full before the work leaves the studio or before we attach it permanently anywhere. Well, I didn't listen to my own contract. It was so busy, and we had their installers, and everyone was on the hour, on the clock, and we installed this piece. And then she said one thing after another that she didn't like about it. And then she said, don't speak to me. And I contacted lawyers, and the amount that the lawyers wanted just to write a letter was about the amount that she owed me. So, but only one time in 25 years. So at any rate, I realized I have a lot to share with people. I also have a lot of skills. I have worked as a welder. When I had that job as the welder, the one and only welder, they x-rayed everything that we did. And then there are things like, how do you get your artwork out there? How do you get people to listen to you? You've got something that you want to say. There are a lot of times that you have what we call rejection, right? You apply for an exhibition, you submit your work, and you get one of those kind letters back, and they say, 500 of you applied, and although we really thought hard and long about each piece, your piece wasn't selected. Now, it's not too hard to make up, I'm not good enough and I don't matter, right? And then there's a way you can put that aside. And guess what? Every time I get a rejection, I apply for 3 more things. So let's see, what else did we create? Well, when Philippe and so I have this offering, it's called Big Vision. And out of the course, Big Vision, it's a 6-week course, and you get an opportunity, any type of artist that you are, to have a lecture each. We have an 1.5-hour Zoom meeting weekly, Wednesday nights. And you can find all the information on my website, CorrinaSephora.com. And we have a platform called Teachable, where you'll have individualized assignments, and you'll have opportunities. There'll be a forum, a public forum. You can share the work that you're up to. And this is open to sculptors, to painters, poets, writers, any creative aspect that you have that you'd like to develop and get out there into the world in your big vision. I have another course, which is how to set up a workshop. One of the hurdles I had with how do I make these how-to videos for people that don't have a workshop. So I have a 2-week course. We span it over a period of time. It's for those people that want to set up a metal shop specifically. I could help you with other aspects of studios, but it's a little geared towards that. We have some supply lists, et cetera, et cetera. And then I have another course, which I'm formulating the finalization, and it's intended to be complementary to my weekend welding workshop, where people would come and make a sculpture, or sometimes people would make an architectural piece, but you come with your own design. And then I have a series of how-to videos, and those will be available as digital downloads. So I've also set up a series of introductions to talk about these. But what I wanted to share with all of you today is there's an opportunity, no matter what you're up to. I know my sister works with people one-on-one, and she used to go to her office. We'd talk on the phone on her way there or back at different times. It was the best visiting time. And I know she's now has the platform where she visits with her clients one-on-one. And many of the rest of you that are on this call, you too have figured out ways to pivot. So for me, what I wanted to share is that whatever it is that you have your mind set to, you can do. You just have to stick to it. So we've got a little bit of time left. You've got about 10 minutes, and I wanted to open up the floor for some question and answer. And feel free to ask me about any of the things that I shared with you. Feel free to share what you're up to and where you are looking at how could you pivot. Maybe you've done that already, or maybe you're looking freshly at a new way that you could. So first and foremost, those of you that are here with me in the live Zoom, thank you for being here. And those of you that are joining live on Facebook, thank you for being here. And let's open the floor for some questions. Anyone have any questions or comments? Just raise your electronic hand or wave voraciously, either one. Alyssum, I'll unmute. Hi.
Hi. Really awesome to listen to your inspirational talk this morning. I really enjoyed it. I guess I wanted to ask about that because where I'm at is I'm pretty comfortable in my what I'm doing in my practice. I'm doing what I feel like I'm meant to do here on this earth, and I feel like my next step is moving into some teaching, and at this point it looks like it'll be online, more like a workshop environment where I'm able to support like people generally as opposed to only one-on-one.
Yes.
And I just wanted to ask what kind of your thoughts on that balance between kind of the sustaining what you're already doing. You know, I've got my bread and butter as you build what you're reaching for.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge you for stretching out there and coming up with something new. That's just great. And just so that I'm clear and I'm answering your question, you want to know like what platforms or what steps to go through to be able to
Oh,
create a group class, or how can I best answer?
no, more conceptual, like the idea of balancing the bread and butter side with the
Right.
reaching side. Um,
That's a great question. Okay, that's a great question. So, and when you say workshops, I'm envisioning that, you know, you want to put some type of platform together, you want to gather some people, and you want to be able to lead a conversation and have people engaged. Now, is this a one time only workshop, or is it like an ongoing, or would you do a couple of those?
I think I'm open at this point. It's still in the formative thinking phase of what I'd like to be doing. I know coming onto your wonderful forum here at Connect and Create, for me, that was a way to grow that edge of being comfortable talking to people,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
in a group as opposed to in smaller arrangements.
Okay, awesome. Well, you know what they say about meditation or learning to play the piano or any of those things, they call it, or yoga practice,
Yeah.
right? And I'll be honest, part of why I created this Connect and Create, well, one, I needed something to do. And two, I was trying to wrap my head around how to feel comfortable really being with people on this format. And you know, Alyssa, we started our family Zoom call, right? And so we get to be with each other in a different and particular way. So I guess the first question I would ask you is, what do you love? Like, what do you love to do? Like in my big vision course, I would ask people, what's something that's really important to you? What's something that is bigger? Like, I like to think of it like, what's something bigger than me? Like, I love going to the mountains or going to the ocean because it's bigger than I am. So if I have something out there that's bigger than I've got to pay my bills, like you mentioned, bread and butter, like when you can get present to what's something that's important to you that you want to share with other people or have them engage with, and then you could start to maybe center the workshop around that. Am I answering your question?
It's coming through. I love the idea of asking myself, what do I love? And
Yeah.
kind of as I'm formulating this, to kind of keep myself centering, you know, a little bit more about that balancing act. But I'm getting some really great information, so I appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, and one of the webinars that I took about 4 or 5 different webinars. I was like, people out there know more than I do about this. I'm going to go learn. And there was this guy. Now he had an app, and he had these like 5 steps, right? And I forget if it was number 2 or number 1. Number 1 was ask the people around you, what would they, so I've been creating these surveys and putting them out there and asking people, what can I share with you, right? What is it that what would you like to learn? And so part of that, I've incorporated that into my course. And then he called it, go find the smartest person and follow the leader.
Great.
So you look at people on social media, who's someone kind of in your field that's doing something that you respect or you admire, and go take one of their classes. So many people are giving free webinars or free Zoom talks, or maybe they're $37 or $100 or, you know, something like that. So you get to invest. Like, you know, I went to a number of them. There was one that I really liked what this lady was doing, but it was like $2,000, and I really wasn't ready to commit to $2,000. You know, but I went through her free webinar and I listened to all the steps, and then I did my version of that. Now, would I do a more perfect job if I took her course and then put everything out there? Maybe, but I did. I took about 4 or 5 different webinars from people that had to do with creating teaching platforms, and that I
Great.
found that to be helpful. So
Great.
follow the leader is what he called it.
Okay.
Find the person that's doing something. They're a hit. You know, I mean, Tony Robbins, right? $10,000, I think, for a year is the least you can pay to be a part of one of his courses. go listen to some Tony Robbins. What is he? I mean, some people think he's just a jerk, right? But doing something that people go for, right?
Like, I get the idea. I like that. Thank you, Corrina.
You're welcome. Have fun. And I'm happy to talk to you more. All right. Anyone else have any comments or questions? We've got 5 more minutes here, so I'm happy to share anything. And if you can't take yourself off, oh, Mary, let me pull you up. Oh, you can take yourself off mute.
There we go.
There we go.
I'm just really excited to hear you talk about pivoting. I'm going like, well, what's she gonna do? So, I mean, it's not that much of a departure because you already teach. It's just the platform is shifted. But you know, what you're going to talk to people about, you've got lots of experience with, you've been doing for a really long time, and you've been a teacher for years. So anyway, I just think it's really great what you're doing. And you know, you and I talked about the possibility of my being on your program with you, yeah, talking about the I Promise Bank. So I'll say more about that at some other point.
Perfect.
But I was looking at like, well, what could I create right now in addition to the bank? What, you know, like I've been working with people for years, and there probably are some things that I wasn't thinking that I could teach to people.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad I showed up here today. Something else got canceled and I was delighted.
Awesome.
I just figured the universe wanted me to be here for you and for me to hear what you had to say. And then the other thing is you just did such a beautiful job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm going to share with the rest of the crowd. There's something really special about Mary being here in this being a first, right? In me sharing these new offerings, because Mary was with me the first time I led a live women's welding workshop. I just remembered that while you were speaking.
Yes.
So that's something that's really special. And she was encouraging me then, and I appreciate you being encouraging now. And Mary, I believe it's 2 weeks from now, we'll have you on Connect and Create. We've got
great.
Does that work for you?
I think that works fine.
Okay, good. So we're working out the details for our future speakers, and Mary has some great. If you want to say a couple things about what your I Promise Bank is.
Well, the I Promise Bank is a place, actually what I call it is a treasury of dreams turned into promises for the world. And it's a place where people put their promises for the world. And how I picture it is that it's this giant network of conversations, of dreams for a you and me world, a world that works for everyone. And so it'll be a place where you can come and get inspired, where you can come and find other people who are working on things that you're already working on. It will be a place where people who have resources and want to invest them, will be able to come and find people who are up to extraordinary things. And it's not just the US, it's like a global treasury of dreams turned into promises for the world.
That is so great, Mary.
Thanks, Corrina.
That is so great. Oh.
For you and
I thought I would check my Facebook Live and see if any questions on there, and all of a sudden your voice was on it. So thank you so much. Dawn or Chad or Lissam, any more questions or comments before we wrap up?
Comments. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Oh.
You are quite a public speaker and so inspiring. I bumped into you so often and we never connected, and I'm sad about that.
Well, here we are now.
Yes, wonderful.
Speaking of connecting, let me put my Facebook, I'll put my website in the chat, if anyone wants, and you're welcome to, you can email me off of that. You can take a look at different offerings that I have.
And what's up next with this Create thing?
Oh, next Tuesday, we're going to have Laura K. Stone. And she is, okay, so in the height of the pandemic, I was running this 3 days a week, but things have picked up a bit more in my studio. So I'm doing it 1 day a week, and it's looking like Tuesday is the day that works the best, because I've got some installation. So next week we have a fabulous photographer, and her name is Laura K. Stone, and she's going to talk about pivoting as well, I believe. She used to be like a headshot photographer, and she's now doing some great porch pictures of your pets and your family. So she's going to talk about her journey. And then, as you heard, Mary will be speaking the following week, and Mary is going to be speaking about, as she mentioned, her I Promise and fulfilling those dreams. And we have a few others that are on the decks, that are still firming up. Let's see. So great. We have some great comments from people on our Facebook Live as well. Great to see. Oh, my cousin Jeff is on there. Looking to see if there's any questions. Lots of hellos. Oh, Jean Flint, who was my first ever office admin person. And Shannon Morris, hello. And Jerry Cullum, remember I mentioned about the articles? Jerry Cullum has personally written about almost every exhibition I've ever had. If you go to my website, there's an area on the website. It's CorrinaSephora.com. There's an area on the website that has articles. It's called something other than articles, though. And anyway, so it's so good to see all of you on Facebook Live. And once again, Kelly. Oh, Kelly is a fabulous sculptor and iron casting genius. I see he's making comments. Pivoting is challenging when you're a sculptor, but it's possible. All right, folks. Also on the website, I have listed a series of introductions I'm going to have for the Big Visions and the other courses. They'll be Wednesday evenings, not this Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. We'll get started with those, and I'll post those links on Facebook as well. So thank you everyone for being here. If you want to take yourselves off mute, we can have a big hurrah and completion of the day. And I hope this was inspirational to you. And Dawn, I'd love to have more conversations in the future.
Yeah.
If you go to my website, you can email me right off of there, if that works for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All
Have
right.
a good day.
Have a
Bye.
wonderful day. Connect and create.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. Connect and Create, episode 14. So
Wow.
good to be with all of you. And I look forward to episode 15. We'll have Laura K. Stone. And stay in touch. If you want to find out the new things that I'm offering nationally and internationally, go to CorrinaSephora.com. And as I mentioned, I'm going to give a little introduction in 2 weeks, not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday, and a few more after that for the Big Vision course and the other courses, if you want to get some Q&A in there, and I'll share a little bit more. Have a great day, and connect and create.
I have a granddaughter named Corinne.
No way.
INNE.
Oh, how about that?
Mm-hmm.
That's so great. Well, thank you for sharing that, Dawn.